So welcome to another in the series of World Class Basics short videos about running a business. As I've said before, some of them are about mindset and some of them are about the mechanics of running the business. This one's definitely about the mechanics of running the business, and it is probably the most important set of concepts you can learn to boost your gross profit, particularly if you sell time for money, which most people do in one form or another. So, let me try and share with you this whole process. So imagine, if you would, a business that sells time. Now I'm going to use a garage because it's A, simple and easy to understand, and B, that's where I spent most of my life. So it just makes it easier. So here's the initial scenario. We employ a mechanic, we pay for 8 hours of his time during the day, and at the end of the day we can invoice out 8 hours of his time. Now, the way I would phrase that, and my phraseology might be a bit specific, a bit dated, but again, you're looking for the general principles. The 8 hours that we paid for, I will call those bought hours. The 8 hours that we were able to invoice out, I will call sold hours. So he produced 8 hours of billable work. Happy days, yeah? And I guess if you were the owner of this business, you'd be reasonably happy with that. I've got to say that most business owners probably don't work this out, but they should. So that's the initial premise. Now, a few years ago, I was working with a business that, for all intents and purposes, was a building business. And I asked the business owner, who was complaining that he wasn't making enough money, I said to him, "What time do your people start?" And he said, "Oh, they start 7:30 every morning." "And what time do they get to the first job?" "Oh, I don't know." "Well, shall we measure it?" So for a couple of weeks, we asked the guys to fill in timesheets. And when we got the timesheets back, we found that it was pretty rare for anybody to be on a job and producing billable labour before 9:30. So they were losing 2 hours per person per day. Now, what that means is that productive hours was actually 6, not 8. So before I go into any more depth on that, let me ask you what I asked him. And I said, "How much are those 2 hours costing you? And are you happy with that?" And what do you think he said? He said, "Well," and I'm making the numbers up here to make it easy. He said, we pay people £10 an hour. So every morning it costs me 2 hours times by £10. That's £20 per person per day. And I said to him, "Are you happy with that?" And what he said to me is, "Well, that's just the cost. That comes with the territory. It is what it is." So, first question, would you agree that that's what it's costing him per person? 2 times the £10 an hour that he's paying them. And what I asked him was, tell me, if those people were on productive work for those 2 hours, what would you sell that productive work out at? And again, to keep the maths easy, he said, "Well, we charge out £50 an hour." So that isn't your real cost, I said. Your real cost is also this. And if you add them together, That's what it's costing you per man per day. I think at the time he had 7 people working for him. So now we're up to, what, £840? Is that what 712s are? A day. Times that by 5 days a week, and we're at a lot of money. At that point, he's starting to swear. Now, it's a technicality, but this cost here is known as, and you need to know this, opportunity cost. That's the cost of doing this rather than doing that. And in his case, it was £120. Incidentally, we also found that he was losing an hour or two at the end of the day, but that would just complicate the calculations. But you can see that the number is now significant. So similarly here, if our mechanic is only actually productive for 6 of those 8 hours, again, you might not be familiar with the terminology, but I was always told this was idle time. So the 2 hours that we're paying for him and is not on productive work is idle time. Now then, the beauty of collecting these numbers, and understand we're only collecting one additional number, and that is how many of those hours are actually spent on productive work. Sometimes I call this spanner time. If you're in the welding industry, then it's often referred to as blue light, blue torch time. So let's just have a look and understand what this is now telling us. Well, the first thing we can do is we can work out our productivity. And our productivity is 6 over 8, and we'd normally express that as a percentage. So that is 75% productive. The inverse of this, idle time, is 2 over 8, which is 25% idle. So we've now got some additional information which will be really important when we come to fine-tune the profitability of this business, as we did. But let's understand something else. In this example, we were still able to invoice out 8 hours of productive work. But our mechanic was only on the spanners for 6 hours. That therefore means that he actually produced 8 hours in 6. So that is 133%. Now, we refer to this as efficiency. So now we've got 3 ratios, well 2 because that's just the inverse of that are really, really important to us. And the reason that they're important to us is that productivity is actually a measure of the efficiency or the slickness of the business, whereas efficiency is a measure of the speed of the individual. Now, why is that important? Well, because if you don't make that differentiation, you might end up chasing the wrong objective. In other words, trying to make the individual more efficient, and 133% efficient, depending on the business, I would say is a pretty damn good efficiency. So if we're putting pressure on the individual to get faster, in this particular scenario, we'd be barking up the wrong tree. What we need to do is increase the productivity. True story now, a number of years ago, I ran a very big and very profitable mechanical workshop in the Midlands. It was by far the most profitable in the group. And then we sat down and we started to do this exercise. That was interesting in itself because my service manager, who should have known this stuff, first of all, he didn't measure this. And he was confused with these terms, which is why I always define them. Otherwise, we end up in a semantic mishmash. And what we found was that efficiency was pretty good. But we also found that the productivity of the whole workshop was pretty appalling. And we've been trying to get the guys to work faster. Why was the productivity so bad? Well, because when you brought your car in for service and the keys were handed to the mechanic, he had to take the keys, go across the road, this was in a city centre, find the car in a car park, dig it out, drive it round the block because it was a one-way system, and into the workshop. And when he was finished, he had to do the same thing in reverse. So we were losing a significant amount of time on every job. The minute we understood where we were losing the time, we were able to do something about it. It also turned out, now that is about the organisation of our business, not about the speed of the individuals. We also found out that although we were open from 7:30 in the morning, when customers rang up to book the car in, we'd say, yeah, of course, Mr. Smith, bring it in. Oh, anytime after 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. Why don't you come in at 9 and avoid the rush hour traffic? So we were automatically building in idle time, where 22 mechanics stood idle until people started drifting in with the cars. So we did two things. We staggered the time that the guys came in, and we encouraged people to bring the cars in earlier or even leave them overnight. The other thing that we did was we employed two people simply to go and collect the cars from the car park and drive them round and bring them into the workshop. So the mechanic was on the tools all the time. And when the car was finished, the car jockeys took them out, parked them up again, and there was another one waiting for the mechanic. They were racking and stacking them in the workshop so the mechanic didn't have to leave his workstation. The profitability of that unit went through the roof. So this stuff really works. In a moment or two, I'll show you how the maths add up. So, labour gross profit. All we need to do is measure one thing and use the ratios that gives us. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just look at the difference that this makes in terms of profitability. So, bought 8 hours, sold 8 hours. So our standard gross profit calculation looks like this. So we sold 8 hours at £50. So that is £400 sales. Everybody happy with that? It cost us £8 hours at £10. So it cost us £80. Therefore the profit was £320, and the gross profit margin, that's 320 divided by the 400. I shouldn't really need a calculator to work this out. Is, no surprise, 80%. Now, The minute we discover that we've got 2 hours idle, 2 hours that are non-productive, we can add that back in there. And if we're able to sell those 2 hours, I'll do it in red because this comes from increased profitability. Our cost doesn't alter at all. We've already paid for those hours. But we can now add on another £100 from those 2 hours. So we now have a cost of 80 and a sale of 500. So the gross profit figure is now 420 divided by 500, which is now 84%. So we've added another 4% to our gross profit margin. Just by doing away with those 2 hours idle time. But that's not actually the whole story, is it? Because in reality, if our mechanic is working for 8 hours, let me take it back to here. If he's actually working for 8 hours without any idle time, we know that he's 133% efficient. So those 8 hours now produce 10.6 hours of billable labour. So that becomes 10.6. 10.64 it is actually. And if that's 10.64, that now becomes 532. That is still 80. So our profit on the day is now 452. And our gross profit is now 85%. And that's the difference that it makes. So, let me be very clear about this. If you're not measuring this, and one of these, you can't do this, and the chances are that you are probably chasing the wrong thing to improve profitability. Remember, in this example, we've gone from a profit of 320 to 452 without raising our prices, without dropping our labour cost, just by becoming more productive. Not efficient, we've left the efficiencies the same. That's why this is so powerful. I hope that's useful for you. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you can make it work for you. As ever, if you've got any questions, you need any collateral, please just drop me a line, ian@kinnery.co.uk. If I can help in any other way, please contact me.